Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hello, fellow culturists, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Prototype Prime for this amazing podcast space. Today is part of the Culture Champion Series. We're joined here by Scott Walker of WaveGuide. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself and WaveGuide.
Well, I'm one of these people. I'm a musician by avocation, but an electrical engineer by education. And, in my industry, if you fail as a rock musician and you have an engineering degree, you end up in the AV business somehow.
Got it.
So that's kind of how I got into this.
Very cool. So how about WaveGuide? What do you guys do there?
Right. So that'll probably be the hardest question you ask me all day. I try to explain this to people at Christmas parties.
You do stuff with AV.
That's what I got. Stuff with AV. and I didn't even know this industry existed, much less the profession existed, until I got into it. So we're this giant, I think it's $90 billion industry, maybe $120 billion globally. We touch everybody every day of the week of their lives. They just probably don't realize there's an industry of people behind it. So we're on the consulting and design side. So we design AV spaces and technologies for giant corporations like Coca-Cola, MetLife, McDonald's, all across lots of vertical markets. We're the designers. There are people who are the installers. There's, of course, the manufacturers, the Ciscos and Sonys and Samsungs and all that. And our job is to take all that technology that's out there and figure out what a McDonald's or a Coca-Cola or a MetLife or insert name here, law firms, financial firms, what they need in their workplace to optimize what they do for a living to communicate better, right? We also do lots of work for universities, government installations, museums. There's probably 20 different vertical markets, from stadiums to bars and restaurants within our industry. We just tend to focus mostly on the big corporate clients.
Got it. So if I go into an amphitheater to listen to a presentation at a MetLife, you would have installed most of that gear that makes that happen.
We would have designed it.
Okay.
We're a little unique among designers in that we probably wrote the software that runs it.
Okay.
And we may be operating it too. So there are lots of jobs to do to deliver audiovisual. There's production like we're doing here today, right? And then there's streaming that production out to people. So we try to take clients from that first instance of saying, as McDonald's did recently, or as Coca-Cola is doing, or Georgia Pacific, or any of our other clients, Porsche, Mercedes, hey, we're going to build a new facility, or we want to move, or we want to attract millennials to come work for us versus the Googles and Amazons and Facebooks. Can you help us with the technology parts of that? And sometimes we're working for the architect. Most often we're working directly for the owner, helping them take their vision of, hey, we want to make a better workplace, or we want to make a better university, or we need to make a better attraction, and we want to use audiovisual technology to do that. Can you help us? Now, once you're in the AV business, you're in related industries. So we're also IT consultants. We help them with their network because most of these signals are now IP-based network signals. We're also acoustics consultants. So a la this room we're in, if this room were all glass, we wouldn't be having a very good experience right now. We get involved with lighting. We get involved with all the technical infrastructure to make these buildings work. And again, I wouldn't even know that was a thing until I started doing it about 30 years ago. And that's how we make a living.
Very cool. So love to get started off hearing more about the culture of WaveGuide.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about kind of your ethos, the values of the company,
Sure.
and what you see as the culture.
We like to joke that we're a 22-year-old startup.
Okay.
So, we're 148 employees today, but we started, as 2 employees working out of 2 different guys' bedrooms, spare bedrooms, and as many things do. So I started WaveGuide in 1996. I had been working for another firm here in town for about 7 years prior to that, and just saw that there was a gap where people wanted to make it simpler. The answer just needs to be yes and go figure it out. And so I kind of built a company around trying to be the easy button, because what we do is complicated and virtually none of our clients fully understand it. That's why they hire us, right? If they knew it all, they wouldn't need us.
Right.
So we just need to find a way to say yes. So first of all, the goal is get to yes quickly. One of the things, though, early on, my profession is probably 50 years old. So thinking about architecture or law or things that have been around for hundreds or thousands of years, right? Mine's very, very young. Therefore, there is no rule book that's been written on this. You don't have to, well, at step 3, the consultant does this, but he shall not do that. We just make it up, right? And so very early on in my career, I was fortunate enough to sort of sit at a round table with all the who's who of the industry, 25 years ago. And I saw that there was just a gap, that people are going to want us to do more than draw drawings and produce specifications. That's really boring. What they want us to do is walk through the user experience and define that user engagement for them. And oh, by the way, yes, we'll design systems around that. But really the focus is a CEO walks in a boardroom and what happens, or a teacher walks in an auditorium, what happens, or the city council chamber sits down, what happens. Because we're humans. That's where we need to be, is engaging people and technology, and then we'll figure out the nuts and bolts behind the scenes. So part of it is all ideas are valid, whether it's the newest, greenest employee or me. Just if we need to go that way, we go there instantly. Another thing is we're very much a doer engineer kind of culture.
Okay.
Though we sell to eat, we're not sellers by nature. We're kind of like, we're nerds, right? So it's kind of a nerdy, relaxed culture, but we're working for some of the biggest corporations in the world. So we want to have fun. We don't want to take ourselves seriously. We do want to take our work seriously, right? We're spending millions and millions of dollars on behalf of our clients to make them a better company or a better university. That's serious stuff. But we don't have to be serious in the office. We can be goofballs. We can be chill. The work is hard. We don't need to make anything else harder, right? So that's kind of the ethos. And because we're project-driven and deadline-driven, sometimes you got to just sort of gird up and do the hard work. And other times, leave a little early today. Beat traffic, get out of here. Because, you're going to work the 16-hour days occasionally. So, we try to have that work-life balance as best we can, given that we can't control deadlines or how many times they stack up on top of each other.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have a pretty dynamic group in that you said, you could be architecting it, right, drawing it out, the room. So that's the architecture and the sound and the layout.
The engineering side,
You got the installers. You got the hardware people that are doing the hardware side, because installing the cabling and low voltage and fiber is different than installing all the equipment.
Yeah.
And the last one I heard that I haven't really heard from, I don't think any other AV company or anybody in that space, is the software development.
Yeah.
So you guys are developing your own software to make these systems easier. And I mean, I always joke like, the Tesla can drive itself, but I was just somewhere literally 2 days ago and plugged in my MacBook and couldn't present because it just wouldn't work.
And I'm a past president of the AV Trade Association. Okay. It's awful to walk the earth and go, our industry as a whole has let you guys down. Now, there's a million reasons for that. It's not the fault of, there's a bigger problem out there in the world, which is people understanding that it's gone from being a trophy room to mission critical. So when we do a project now for a Shell oil company or, a big Fortune 10 company.
Critical.
This is thousands of spaces. This is how work gets done. This isn't an option anymore. It's not a luxury. It's not like, everyone go to your 3-ring binders and go to page 400 anymore. It's like, wah, end of meeting, right? That just can't happen. So we are in the software business to automate these things, because if you tell people you have to hit 47 buttons to get this meeting going, that doesn't fly. It's now one button, start my meeting. That's how most people want to engage, or no button. If you book this room to do this type of event, the lights and the shades and the gear can respond to that event, and you don't have to do anything. So we call it this conservation of complexity. To make it easy for Josh walking in this room, there's some other stuff behind the scenes needs to happen. for somebody to have one button control of their meeting, other stuff happens behind the scenes. So our goal is to always present back to that user journey, the easiest journey for that user, right? But there are complicated things in the world, and big all-hands meetings for a corporate rollout of a new product or service or something, that's going to take a team. So we do on-site AV operations to run meetings for our clients at Coca-Cola, MetLife, William Blair, Capital One, insert name here, because there are events that can't be automated. It is go to camera three, okay, do this. Now let's go to wide shot. Now we're going to take the calls from the far end. And these meetings are becoming full-blown TV productions. They're not just click, PowerPoint.
Yeah.
They're meant to be engaging. They're meant to have people from around the world presenting, and that can be a nightmare. You've got, every possible point of failure between here and all those remote people, and we've got to test for that and make it work. And that's a valuable thing in planet Earth today.
Yeah, and certain things you just have to have a human looking at the shot or switching the board and seeing the real-time interaction.
There are people at NASA at every one of those monitors.
Checking things.
I'm sure, Tesla could write some software to make, that happen automatically, but you kind of want some eyes on that. So
from what I read, going to NASA, I mean, SpaceX supposedly automated more checks than anybody in history to launch because a lot of it was manual before for NASA and of course Soyuz and other stuff.
And that's a great example.
The check system.
We want to move as many things as we can to be automated, right? So they're repeatable with the least footprint of people, because people cost money, right? And we don't want the clients to pay for people to sit around and do nothing, right? We want always to move to the highest part of the value chain where they're doing the hardest work that requires a human being. And the software can take care of a lot of the rest, or the simplicity of the design can take care of a whole bunch of it. So our industry went through this kind of curve of complexity where every room had to have a DVD player and a tuner and VGA and HDMI, and nobody could run this junk, right? And so now it's pretty clean. I'm going to get that laptop wirelessly up to this screen, and I want to share it with the people who are not in the room, and I want to start my meeting with one button press. That's everybody's goal. The thing we're super stoked about is, as we make certain things simpler, great. Now let's pull data on how people are actually using their facilities, how they're working. What is work in the planet Earth today? This thing we call work, how do we make it optimized for people? And then we take it from the people side out to go, then what buildings and facilities do they need, and what technology do they need in those buildings, and what policies do they need? So it's not just about the gear. It's about looking at that experience and saying, can we make people more effective and efficient in their jobs?
Yeah, I know, talking about kind of effective and efficient. So I did a dive trip with some friends in Bermuda, and one of the friends knew the lady that was on the nightly news. And so we go and sit on the set of the nightly news, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be cool. There's cameras and people and whatnot. And apparently it was her in front of multiple cameras and one guy up at the top, controlling all the cameras remotely, all the sound. There was two people doing the nightly news. And I was like, it kind of reminded me of what you were saying. You do have to have a person, but we're getting to the point where that one person can automate and manage multiple screens and inputs and everything else. You don't have to have quite the army you used to if you can automate these things.
Exactly. So that's that mix of designing for a use case. So there was a use case that they had that said, we want to interview people, okay, how do we do that most efficiently so we can step and repeat that? So we do the same thing, whether it's a corporate headquarters, university, a government facility. What are you trying to do? At CDC is a big client of ours. What are they trying to do at the CDC? What are the things that happen daily, weekly, monthly, annually that we want to build for? And trying to make that where the fewest number of humans can make that happen successfully 99.9% of the time is kind of the goal.
Got it. So in building the company culture at WaveGuide over the past few years and the time that you've been there, what influence did you draw off of? So what past roles had you had and experience that you had where you said, I want to make sure that we do that in our company? Or what are some of the amazing culture experiences that you've had?
Well, I'm one of these weird guys. I've only had 2 jobs in 30 years. I'm very weirdo because I basically, 3 jobs if you count. The one I had right out of school, which I worked at the Charleston Naval Shipyard, got bored out of my brain. I've never been bored before that in my life or since, but for a year I was completely bored. So I learned, oh my God, you got to challenge people. Don't stick a 22-year-old behind a computer and have them be bored to death. The experience prior to that I probably draw on the most was working for my dad in high school as a little shipping guy for his very tiny little family-run business. He sold dental supply products, which company never got bigger than me, my dad, my mom, my sister, and a couple of other people. But, you know, working with your dad, particularly if it's a guy like my dad, was just, you know, a wash of life lessons happening every day that I didn't even realize when I was 16, 18, 20 years old until I started running my own business. Simple things like, you know, you just don't show up late to meetings, period. You
Right.
know, and my dad he was from the deep south. He just had a particular parlance about it saying, you know, the man ain't paying us to be late. And, you know, it was just hundreds of lessons about why you do that extra little bit, you know, that they're expecting this, and we threw this extra thing in. Didn't charge them for it. It's a little surprise, little, you know, extra. Just about company or, you know, earning client loyalty for your business to grow your business. So I learned a ton from him just about service and service attitude. You know, and I'm schooled in engineering. I'm not schooled in business. I've never read a sales book in my life. You know, I just sort of learned a lot about selling by going on sales calls with him. Was bored for a year, then I worked for another company, and that was a real startup. I was the one employee. There were two owners and me. So I got to watch another small business. I'd watched my dad grow a small business. I watched my previous employers grow a business and learned a lot. And hats off to them, and thank you for, you know, giving me a shot. What I wanted to do out of that was just evolve the art of what we did to new places, into software, into that user experience, into operations, and now, you know, into data analytics. So I felt hemmed in and stressed out incredibly. And what I learned in the process was there's good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. There's kind of good stress, bad stress. And the stress I don't have any problem with is where you can affect the change. The stress that literally drove me to having medical conditions was the stress you can't control.
Yeah.
And so I try to extrapolate that. I want to give my employees the empowerment to relieve their own stress by having agency to make things better. And that's kind of the culture I try to leave people alone. You know, hire smart people, give them hard stuff to do and leave them alone and let them do that. And then they come and say, hey, here's what we've done. And, you know, the folks who have really thrived at WaveGuide have been the ones who they had that extra little thing. It's like, yeah, I hit the target. But along the journey, I discovered this, so I've added this. Like, holy cow, I never would have thought of that. So, you know, part of the culture is just letting people have freedom. You also have to have a culture where they have to see that we're working hard too. It's not like the boss is checked out, you know.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to do anything you're asking them to do. They have to have seen you do 100 times, you know. And it gets harder the bigger you get. That, well, maybe some of the young employees didn't see all the all-nighters I pulled to get to this point where they could have a job here. But they have to know in our DNA that we'll do whatever it takes to make it right and get the job done.
Yeah. So, you know, even though there's only been a few roles before this, what were some examples, or do you have any examples of things that weren't something you wanted to carry on?
Yeah. I think it gets back to valuing every voice in the room. And if somebody's trying to tell you, hey, there's a fire going on over here, you know, you have to listen to that stuff. Particularly if somebody's job all day is to do this thing over here and they're trying to tell me something about that thing over there, I've got to listen to that, because they've done the hard work to figure out, here's this information. And I think it's very important to build an organization where you're just listening to all those voices, and your time gets constrained trying to, in my role, bring new business in, right? So
right.
I'm constantly asking the world, please bother me, please bother me. At the same time, I would love to just sit and make WaveGuide better every day. So we have to create tools for that. And I just, you know, I even my 1 year at the shipyard, I was like, oh my gosh, there's 40 people sitting on this floor. We could do this way more efficiently with like 4 people, you know, but
yeah.
It's not like they were going to listen to my ideas, you know. And that's really frustrating. And you know, that's why I wasn't a long timer there. Nothing against the Charleston Naval Shipyard, but, you know, It wasn't for me, because I just wanted to invent and create, and I want to attract people around me like that. And that's why there's, at WaveGuide, probably half of us are musicians and or come out of that creative world. It's just that part of the brain that, oh, we'll make it up as you, just like you'd sit down and write a song, just sit down and write a better WaveGuide, so that's kind of how we go about our jobs every day.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Last question I have is about kind of the future. So what do you think your biggest challenge in the company culture is, and where do you want to take that? How do you see overcoming the challenge that you have?
So, the .com and the tech company guys I don't know how to scale like from 0 to 1,000 employees fast. My son is starting actually an app company, and he potentially has this trajectory of which would be alien to me. I don't even know how that works, but I might find out through my son's company. But, so we've been growing. It took us 20 years to hit 100 employees, and we're at 150 at year 22. We'll be 200 probably within 6 or 9 months. We're just growing rapidly. So as you grow rapidly, how do you keep that sort of small punk rock kind of aesthetic, right? Like, it's still a pirate ship. We're still just, let's make it up every day if we can. You got a lot of people now, and they have to kind of know, what is the standard operating procedures of WaveGuide. So it's a balancing act to go, there are rules and there are things we do and, guardrails. But by the way, you can jump the guardrail if you find a better way to get to the destination. Yeah. So I think growth, long-winded way of saying, I think growth is a challenge, right? To keep that culture while you double in size. There are already people that work for me that I haven't met yet, and if we had 20, 30 more people, I don't, even often get a chance to meet them before we hire them. We're growing at that pace at this point. Now, eventually I meet everybody, but it might take 6 months after they started that I make it to every place, because we have people at probably 30 different locations across the U.S. That's a challenge. Globalization's a challenge. Our clients are global. They want us to be global. We are global. We do work in more than 30 countries, but they would rather us be local in London, in Dubai, in, insert city here. And I'd love to do that too, but that's a big challenge. Yeah, we're still a small company. Now, we did get bought by a massive company. So we're part of Compass Group, which is a giant publicly traded $28 billion world's largest food service and hospitality company, which is a whole other discussion. But
that's an interesting transition. But.
Yeah. So, we're part of a giant company now that does operate in 60 countries. Now, we're part of the USA division, so we're USA focused. But, that's partly what's going to be fueling our growth, and we need to pay attention to still staying kind of that small company aesthetic while we add lots and lots more people.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing on the podcast today.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been great being here.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.